A Republican showdown is underway in Georgia, where the race for governor has ignited a political firestorm over the party's national direction. The state's former Senator David Perdue launched his own campaign Monday with a key endorsement from former President Trump. He's challenging incumbent Governor Brian Kemp in the Republican primary next year. And while some members of the GOP have picked sides, others are distancing themselves from the battle. And of course, this all comes after voting rights activist Stacey Abrams launched her second bid for governor last week. Georgia is considered a crucial battleground state, and the GOP primary is likely to be extremely divisive. So for more on this, let's bring in Tia Mitchell. She's a Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Tia, thanks for joining us. Man, Georgia has been definitely interesting over the past few elections, and it's going to get even more interesting. As I mentioned, Georgia is a swing state. Perdue lost his Senate seat to Democrat Jon Ossoff in a runoff election earlier this year. Could this impact his run for governor? And what's his focus now?
Well, so he lost, but he was recruited heavily, not just by President Trump, but there are indications that leaders in the Senate also recruited David Perdue to run for governor because they just don't believe that incumbent Governor Brian Kemp can beat Stacey Abrams. Former President Trump has spent a lot of months criticizing Governor Kemp, and it has very much diminished Republican support for Governor Kemp. And so David Perdue was recruited to come in and save the day.
So former President Trump endorsed Perdue. But, you know, we've had a lot of discussions, especially watching the election in Virginia, about the role that the former president can play in some of these elections, just whether or not there is a taste for his type of campaigning. What do you foresee when it comes to this race?
So I do foresee that there is going to be, in many ways, a referendum, not just on the former President Trump, but also current President Biden. This race is going to be very much nationalized. But when it comes to former President Trump, there is going to be a lot of conversation within the Republican Party itself over how much influence he should have and over whether he can stick his thumb on a state-based race and determine the outcome. If you look at what happened in Virginia last month, that prevailing Republican had Trump's endorsement, but did not campaign alongside the former president. And I think Republicans believe that's a winning formula, but that's not necessarily what would happen if David Perdue enters into the race, because he would be the front runner who not only is endorsed by Trump, but who was recruited by Trump and who, in essence, is going to need Trump because Brian Kemp is anticipating this, has really worked to kind of shore up his own support, shore up the establishment. And so that really leaves kind of Trump energy where David Perdue is going to pull from.
What is Governor Brian Kemp's sort of popularity now? How is he doing in the state? It's from this distance where I am, it's hard to tell if he's well liked or not.
Yeah, that's a great question because it varies depending on which type of Republican you're speaking to. There are a lot of, those Trump MAGA Republicans who believe that Governor Kemp did not do enough to overturn the outcome of the election, which we know was based on lies and falsehoods, but they still join President Trump in blaming Governor Kemp for what happened. But you also have plenty of Republicans who say, hey, I think Kemp has done a great job. I support Trump, but I support Kemp too. There's no reason to have a contentious primary. There's no reason to get rid of a governor who, by and large, we think has done a good job, with the economy. And Kemp was very resistant to COVID lockdowns and COVID mandates, for example, and that's very popular with the base. So there isn't necessarily widespread energy to get rid of Governor Kemp until you inject the Trump, the Trump forces. And then that's when, people start listening to David Perdue because Donald Trump told them they should.
Oh, wow, that's so interesting. How is Governor Kemp responding to Trump's efforts to get him kicked out of office?
Well, Governor Kemp is still trying to walk that fine line. Of course, he says, I've done a
Yeah.
good job. I've done great for Georgia. Look at all these things I can point to. Georgia's economy is booming and jobs are coming back. And I resisted COVID lockdowns. I resisted mask mandates. He avoids directly criticizing Donald Trump. Now, he will stick up for himself, but he does so in a way that does not directly criticize Donald Trump. And again, he has also worked to get establishment forces behind him, entities like the Georgia Chamber. And he's going to work to try his best to build a coalition that supports him without directly criticizing President Trump, in hopes that some of those Trump Republicans will still give him a look.
And I would think that the GOP is also considering who could be successful against the Democratic candidate. And we know Stacey Abrams is running. And, after her loss, she really sort of became a force within the Democratic Party in terms of getting the votes that the party needed in Georgia. And so she's back at it again, a little bit smarter, a little bit more sort of battle worn. How is she likely to fare against a Perdue or a Kemp?
So, that's the $1 million question. We know that Stacey Abrams came very close in 2018, closer than any Democrat who had won statewide. And then, of course, we saw in 2020 and 2021, Democrats built on those gains and won several statewide races. Stacey Abrams' campaign will say that look at how Georgia's population has shifted. Over 1 million people have moved to the state, and those folks tend to skew younger than the Georgia population, and they also tend to skew with more people of color, increasing that share of people of color in the Georgia population. And those are people who tend to vote with Democrats. So just by population increases alone, Stacey Abrams thinks her chances are better than they were in 2018. That being said, Brian Kemp beat her once, and his supporters are saying, we know how to beat Stacey Abrams. We've done it before. That's another reason why they say they're better equipped for this race than David Perdue, because they say we're the ones who beat her in 2018 and we can do it again.
Interesting stuff, Tia. I feel like we'll be talking to you a lot as the races get underway. Tia Mitchell, thank you very much.
Thank you.